Hello everybody, welcome to Market Failure, part 2 of the e-lecture. So in this e-lecture, we'll be looking at policy effectiveness type of question. So in this lecture, I'll be going through what is meant by this type of question. Second, how to go through or how to recognize, identify this type of question. And third, what is the general structure to or approach to answer this kind of question. So these are three things that I'll be going through in my lesson. So apparently content covered, there will be no content like econs concept to be covered because I'm looking at the structure of answering this kind of question. Then for the content kind of questions, like for example, how does text help to decrease the consumption of cigarettes or beer or alcohol? This kind of question or the content you can find out from the lecture notes itself in the market failure lecture notes. So I leave it to you to own the responsibility of learning. So the content wise, please read it up in the lecture notes. Here, okay, so what is meant by this type of question? So usually this kind of policy effectiveness kind of question, it requires students to assess the effectiveness or the desirability of a policy. So the word policy here, it does not limit to the policy or the action taken by the government. It can also be the causes of action taken by the individuals or the firms to pursue their own self-interest. So it can be the action taken by the firms or individuals. So apparently for this type of question contain four elements. Someone, when we refer to someone, it could be the economic agent. Here it refers to the government, producer or firms, and the consumer, like what we say individual, or rather the household, the other consumers. Doing something. For example, government, we can talk thought of the policy. Of firms, something could be strategies. For example, strategies taken to increase the total revenue. And household, like what are the actions taken by the household to achieve their own self-interest. Then the third part, so went through first, second, third. So the third element is to solve some problem or to achieve some goal. So this is usually what we meant by the objective of the action taken. After all, everything, the fourth part, which is the last part, is usually the set of the criteria to judge the desirability of the policy. This is actually the evaluation part. So you need to evaluate the policy to assess whether it is feasible or effective or not. So this is what we meant by policy effectiveness type of question. So how to identify this type of question? Here, because the content to be covered is actually market failure, so I have some examples of some market failure kind of question, but in fact it does not only limit to the content market failure. It can be also quite a bit about macroeconomics as well on the policy effectiveness type of question. So here, looking at 5 questions, I'll give you 1 minute to look through. Can you identify the differences between the policies? What are the similarities? And is it possible to categorize the questions together? So I leave you 1 minute to read the question, then we'll go through together. So, when you look through the questions, what are the similarities among the question? Okay, first, like what we mentioned, it is about market failure, the content to be covered in the answer for all the questions. Second, it is about policy making. But what are the differences? Is it talking about only one policy, or are the questions asking about more than one policy? If you were to look carefully, you will realize that the first question, though, evaluate the effectiveness of only using ERP as a mean to control the congestion level. But the word here, only, meaning that you should not only be looking at one policy. In fact, you should actually compare to one to two policy. Altogether, it will be more than two policies to do a comparison, and to highlight why you should only use this type of policy or this policy. Then is there any similar question that you can see from the 5 questions here? The closer question, or rather I can categorize them together, will be the last question. Assess whether shutting down, which is one action taken by the firms or the factories, is the best way to curb the river pollution. So here similarly, only one policy is being mentioned in the question itself. But the word here, only way, actually give you an idea that you should compare to more than 3 policy and to identify that why this action is the best way. So there must be a comparison of at least 3 policies to highlight the word only and the best. Okay, then you will realize that for this question, discuss whether Singapore should use pollution permits to address market failure in Singapore. So obviously here you are looking at only one policy mentioned in the question. So what you need to do is to highlight the pros and cons, or rather you can have the theses and antitheses. Later on, I'll go through the general structure of answering this kind of question. So for this question, it is only asking about one policy. Then maybe for evaluation part of this question, what you can do is to compare to other policy and to highlight that this policy using the pollution permit may not be the best policy. Okay, this is for evaluation whereby you compare to other policy. But apparently the content-wise will be talking about only one type of policy here. Then lastly, if you were to look at the last, the third and the fifth question, so assess the feasibility of using market-based solution, so on and so forth. And the second part will be evaluate the policies. Here, the word policy, market-based solutions, you are actually required to compare among the policy. So what is the main difference between this kind of question in rectangle and the question in circle? The question in circle is also similarly you are actually comparing the policy, but here this question you are supposed to identify that why this is the best. Here this is just comparing the policy and to give an evaluation, maybe in your own opinion which is the best. So this will be a good evaluation at the end of the answer. Okay, so now I am going to move a little bit faster. Here, look at this kind of question, the triangle. You are asked to look at one policy. So what is the general approach to answer this type of question? Okay, you can actually use something called TAE. What is TAE? This is the thesis, antithesis, plus your evaluation. So to use this approach, you must be very clear of what is meant by the thesis, what is meant by antithesis in the first place, which I will go through later on. So it is very important that in this type of question, right, answer must be balanced. So you must show the pro and the cons of the policy. So to show the both sides of the issue. So first when you begin, right, this must be a policy. Remember, an action taken by somebody to solve a problem. So you identify the issue in the first place. Then you do have a policy. You call it policy A, let's say. And this is being asked in the question. So what you need to do is to identify the thesis, which I will go through later on. Later part, it will be the antithesis. You can actually have more than one argument for each side. Then lastly, what you need to do is to draw a conclusion. In your own opinion, do you think for the context itself, in the context of Singapore or China or India or Europe, the policy, is it feasible? Can it be carried out or not? Is this desirable? So the limitation of the policy, which could be form part of the antithesis here. So I will talk about it later on. Okay, so general structure, let me highlight again. It will be, first, identify the issue. This is your introduction. Then, second part, what is the thesis? Third part, antithesis. Lastly, this will be your conclusion. But of course, here you can actually form more than one paragraph. Similar for this side. Alright, so how do you answer what is meant by the thesis? Here, the thesis argument always focus on one reason, or it could be actually more than one reason, why the policy may be effective. And it could be using the explicit explanation of the theory to explain. Using the theory to explain how it will achieve the objective or to solve the problem. So this is also using the theory. For example, you are talking about using taxes to reduce pollution, to tax on the firm production and to reduce pollution. So what you need to do is, since taxes and subsidy, as what we learned, they are market-based solution. So by right diagram here, always make it a point to draw diagram to illustrate your point, especially on taxes and subsidy. So these are actually good area for you to gain high marks, because diagram wise, if you ask any person who don't study econs, right, they can explain to you, to tell you that taxes, it will increase the cost and hence people will not buy it. But as an econ student, show your understanding, show off your knowledge by drawing the diagram to show that this is how different I am as compared to the other people who never studied econs before. So this is what we meant by thesis argument. Focus on one reason why the policy may be effective, and to use theory to explain how it can actually achieve the objective. Then if this is the case, how should you write antithesis? So antithesis, what is meant by antithesis? Okay, antithesis, you should be looking at what are the limitations of the policy, why the policy, explain why the policy may not be desirable. So these are the areas, an acronym to help you to look at the different area of antithesis. For example, feasibility. What is meant by feasibility? It actually refers to the extent which the policy can be carried out. So effectiveness, how about effectiveness? Effectiveness actually refers to the extent when, if the policy is being implemented, can it achieve, if implemented, can it achieve the main objective? So for example, if you want to say that using taxes to reduce pollution, is it effective or not? So you might want to look at the production of the good, the demand of the good, whether is it price elastic or price inelastic. If the demand of the product itself is price inelastic, if I increase by imposing more indirect subsidy, the supply curve will shift up, the price will increase, but the extent of the decrease in the quantity demanded is less than proportion, because the demand itself is price inelastic, and hence this may not be effective. Another feasible or another example that you can use is maybe cigarettes or alcohol to determine whether the product, is it price elastic, or whether the demand of the product, is it price elastic or inelastic, and to explain whether if policy is being implemented, can it achieve the main objective? Then the next one will be appropriate